Good morning, everyone. We'll just wait 2 more minutes to allow others join, and then we start. Mhm. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Deloitte Nigeria's webinar team, The Future of Controls. My name is Olashubumi Oshibodu. I'm an Associate Director within the Audit and Assurance practice here in Nigeria, and I'm delighted to serve as your moderator for today's session. We're pleased to have you join us for what promises to be a very insightful conversation on how organizations can strengthen their control environment to become more resilient, more technology enabled, and also value focused. Today's conversation goes beyond viewing controls as just a compliance requirement. It's about reimagining controls as a strategic enabler that would help organizations to be able to respond faster to emerging risks, make better decisions, and ultimately support a sustainable business performance. So we have a rich program ahead of us today, which would feature our industry experts that have also worked within their regions to drive controls transformation. We're also going to be having a panel session that is going to be very interactive. After that, we would have questions and answers. So as much as possible, while you're on the call, please endeavor to drop your questions in the chat buttons. And we believe as we go ahead with the sessions, we would be able to take as many questions as possible. Before we begin with today's session, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. I'll start off with Ibukun Beecroft. Ibukun is a partner within our Deloitte Nigerian office. She's currently the West Africa Audit and Assurance market leader. She has her experiences around advisory services, and she's supported a number of organizations on areas around governance, risk management, internal control, internal audits, and controls transformation. Also joining her today, we have Annie Sangupta, who is a partner in our Deloitte UK office. He works within the technology and transformation function. He has experiences around technology strategy, digital transformation, and also driving sustainable outcomes through innovation and operational excellence. So Annie would be bringing his technology and transformation perspective to the conversations that we'll be having here today. We also have Sisa Tago, who is a partner in our South Africa member firm office. He works within the control assurance practice. He specializes in internal controls transformation, control automation, technology-enabled assurance, and future of controls initiatives. I believe to begin or to set the tone for today's discussion, it's my pleasure to welcome or invite Ibukun Beecroft, who would set the tone and introduce what future of controls is all about to us. So Ibukun, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shubumi, and thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. When we talk about future of control, we're not talking about a distant destination. The future is already here. And organizations across industries are being challenged to rethink how controls are designed, monitored, sustained in an increasing digital and fast-changing environment. Traditionally, we know that controls were largely retrospective. They are focused on identifying issues after they have occurred. And many organizations do rely on manual reviews, periodic testing, and fragmented reporting. While those approaches did serve important purpose, the complexity and speed of today's business environment demand something that is different. And that's why we have the Future of Controls webinar today. And the Future of Control is about moving from a reactive assurance to a proactive risk management. And what does this mean? That means there are three major shifts that you'll be seeing when you're talking about Future of Controls. The first is controls becoming increasingly intelligent and automated. Organizations were saying that they are leveraging automation, analytics. Organizations are leveraging automation, analytics, and artificial intelligence to monitor transactions and activities in real time, rather than waiting for quarterly reviews or annual assessments. Leading organizations are implementing those continuous control monitoring to identify anomalies, expectations, and emerging risks as they occur. The second shift we're seeing is that controls are expanding beyond financial reporting. And that's where you see a number of board members who are already thinking, how do we manage the risks that we're faced with from the financial statement reporting and regulatory compliance? So boards are focused on operational excellence, cybersecurity, data governance, ESG reporting, third-party risks, and emerging technology risk. Organizations are therefore broadening their controls framework to address both financial and non-financial risk in an integrated manner. And the third shift is that controls are becoming a strategic enabler for business performance. High-performing organizations no longer view controls as a compliance burden. Instead, they view controls as a source of trust, resilience, and competitive advantage. Effective controls enables organizations to innovate with confidence, scale operations securely, and respond more quickly to change. In other words, good controls do not slow organizations down. They help organizations to move faster with greater certainty. As we look ahead, there are a few critical questions that leaders should be asking themselves. And the first question is, are our controls aligned to the risk that matters most today? Are we leveraging technology to automate and monitor controls effectively? Do we have visibility over emerging risk arising from AI, digital transformation, and changing regulatory expectation? How our control environment helping the business create value rather than simply demonstrating compliance? Let me leave this here so that I will allow our expert in the room to be able to unpack this. And what I will say is that please listen attentively and let us share together and also learn in terms of what it is about future of control. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Ibukun, for setting the context for the future of controls. I believe we can move on to the next section, where we would explore how rapid digitization, evolving regulations, changing customers' expectations, and emerging risks are then reshaping the controls landscape. As we move on into the next session, we encourage you to participate in the polls and also submit your questions throughout the webinar session. To take us through this discussion, I'm pleased to invite Annie Sangupta, who is a partner in our technology and transformation function. So Annie, over to you.
Morning, Africa. And it's an absolute pleasure to speak to 227 participants about future of controls. And I genuinely thank you all. I will, over the next hour or so, I will share what I have learned across the world as I lead the future of controls proposition around the globe for Deloitte. There will be practical, pragmatic examples. You will have time and opportunity to ask me questions later on. But please feel free to submit your questions. Let me share my screen first so that we can absolutely see what we are going to talk about today. Okay. Now, many of you must be thinking, oh, Ani has come to talk about future of controls. We are going to talk about technology, AI, Gen AI. Yes, I am going to talk about Gen AI, etc. But I am also going to first start with what is control? And why control? Because it is quite important to understand what is that we are going to work on. Because whenever I go and work with number of global organizations around the world, the first thing they think about future of controls is technology control. But what I'm seeing is that there is a lack of clarity in what is control and why we need control. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on that. Absolutely, I will share examples across the controls life cycle to show you how global organizations are reimagining the controls life cycle, from defining the controls to operate the controls to monitor and assure. And yes, we will reimagine, but we need to be also practical. We need to think about how we go about it. What's the journey we are going to go through? So, how we become a control intelligent organization. And then we absolutely need to have our focus on how we deliver value. So this is going to be the next 45 minutes or so. We will have a couple of polls in between, but I hope I will keep your interest and excitement throughout the session. So let me start with the first thing about the shifting landscape. Yeah. And I wanted to look at internally within the organization and also externally, what are the factors that are affecting organizations? Nothing to do with risk and control, just how organizations are actually operating in a new landscape. So I met with a number of our client leaders last month to talk about what are the critical elements that are actually influencing or reshaping how the organizations are operating today. Now, you also have seen number of reports on the web pages and everywhere. But if we really focus on what's going on, there are six critical elements that are influencing the business environment. Yeah. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but let me bring it to life, some of them. Digital acceleration. Yeah. Absolutely. We all know how fast the entire world is moving. Now, from a business perspective, when I look at it, it's the infrastructure, the ERP platforms, etc., are absolutely shifting the landscape of how we are getting this ERP and how we are operating under this ERP platform, but also when we are and how we are applying Gen AI. Now, when I look at Africa, and by the way, I have worked extensively in West Africa with Guinness and Diageo, with Sage and others. So I have a fair bit of an idea of how we operate and what we do in Africa. And I absolutely value the youth and how they are leading the whole digital evolution. And one of the reports I was reading from OECD, which said that, look, from a Gen AI perspective in Africa, they may not be absolutely in the day-to-day business, but there is rapidly the youth under 35 in Africa are actually using Gen AI. And despite the slower enterprise adoption, they are adopting. But as you can imagine, with that comes the point about, okay, people are using it, but the enterprise are not pushing it. So how you balance and manage the use of GenAI in the right way to improve and increase the productivity? How we are actually beyond GenAI, look at the SAP or the Oracle or the Microsoft platforms, how we maximize the use of it. So this is about how we balance and manage, how we put the guardrails that we need to operate under. The other one, interesting one I will call out is the number five, technology, political, and climate disruption. I will not go into the political and climate disruption. Let me just tell you how technology, this is slightly different than the digital acceleration. If you look at how we are operating today from a business perspective, the more and more we are influenced by the big tech players. We are using their platforms and quite, I would say, slowly, we are getting into the habit of we have to operate under that platform. With the new SaaS model, we are getting into the dependency of using that platform, whether it's the GenAI or whether it's anything else. We are actually getting into using that platform. So what's going to happen in another 5 years' time is the platforms. I would not say the platforms will rule, but the platforms will have a significant influence in how we operate. So, therefore, the whole question comes how you balance and how you manage. And with that, what does it really mean? There are four things, if you really look at, that's happening. One is the speed with which we need to operate, the speed with which we need to get with the customer, the speed with which we need to deliver our goods, our services. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we are balancing it with the resilience. We cannot, in the name of speed, just give up and say, hey, we are going to serve that crate of beer to the whole customer, irrespective of the how we operate, etc. We need to balance between the speed and resilience. There is a significant focus on cost. So, how we balance between achieving that speed with the cost that we actually are going to operate with. And then, absolutely, the consumer behavior are going to push you further into having the best quality. Yeah, you cannot sacrifice quality, but the quality comes with the cost. So, how we balance? Now, so the point comes into how we balance and manage and how we put the guardrails. And for a moment, if you step back, that is what your risks are. That is where you need to bring in the controls. So it's just not that you have a process, therefore you have risk and things can go wrong. No, it's the business and the environment in which you operate are actually driving you to think, what are the risks that we are actually trying to? It's not just financial or financial reporting risks. These are operational risks and beyond just financial risks. So, if for a moment I move on and look at internally, I wanted to look at four different profiles in the organization from the C suite: the CEO, the CFO, the CTO or CIO, and the CRO, and the Chief Risk Officer, and the Chief Controls Officer. You clearly see that each of their roles are quietly shifting. So if you look at a CFO, he or she does not need to be an accounting geek anymore. They have to be a strategic partner with the technologists, how we are going to apply the platforms, how we are going to apply the technology in order to get the maximum. So for a moment, if we just look at what sort of roles and challenges the CEOs are actually having. So if you look at today, the CEOs, they need to manage the pace of change without breaking the organization. That's the ask from the CEO. The ask from the CEO is how he or she will build new capabilities while maintaining the core business. You have to absolutely deliver. The CEO is getting more and more into managing stakeholders and navigating the regulatory uncertainty, and especially given the whole GenAI agenda. So you can clearly see they are operating under a real tough environment. If you look at the CFOs, goodness me, how they actually help improve the use of technology, how they actually use the whole innovation landscape in order to deliver on the finance agenda better. If I look at the CTO, CIO, they need to think about just not IT. They need to think about how IT is affecting the major business decisions and how they are actually operating. And the final one from the CRO's perspective, if you look at, they need to absolutely become the strategic partner and just not a compliance. They need to think about scenarios. They need to think about regulations that are going to come up with. So if you again take a step back internally within the organization, you can clearly see that the roles are asking for how you manage the change, how you really understand where are the risks, where are the items that you need to focus on, and how you navigate. So again, that is what where you need to think about what is control. It's just not financial or financial reporting. So if I put all of this together, it provokes some question. What forces are shaping the future? You, as an organization, you, as a leader of an organization, really need to think and start from not just a process, but take a step back, think about what are the forces and how you are going to operate, and then think about what is that, therefore, you need to control, you need to manage, you need to balance. One of the biggest thing is controls is when you say controls, the immediate reaction is it's negative. You really need to therefore think about why people are thinking it as a negative. What is the value it's providing? Do you have enough resilience to survive and succeed in the landscape that you are operating? And therefore, what does it mean in terms of risk management? The controls are equally about balancing leadership, capability, and governance. Again, this is to think beyond financial or financial reporting risk management. And you need to have an ambition. I know it needs money, it needs funding to bring in the technological changes. Yes, but if you look at, I give you a simple example. Yeah, one of the big issues in terms of in Africa with this whole technology and the Gen AI are the differences in languages across Africa. And I was reading, and I'm not an expert, but I was reading about the Masakani Africa Language Hub. The number of open source frameworks, 100 plus, are actually helping you to bring the different translations and allowing you to innovate and operate with the same standard ideas and thinking is absolutely brilliant. We need those aspirations, those ambitions for the future to therefore think about what is control and how you are going to operate in that control. Now, this is about questions. This is about thinking, therefore, what is the risk you're trying to manage? What are the controls you are, therefore, trying to operate? So, my humble suggestion, if I say, as you go into and look at your controls, take a step back, think about what is really important. As Ibukun mentioned, this is about what matters most to you, and then think about what are the controls you need to bring. And it is quite clear that you need controls. And controls not to manage risk, but to help organization achieve the objectives, achieve the strategy. That's the way we need to look at controls. And that's the way I see global organizations are looking at it. Okay, so with that, I'm going to leave you with the quote that I heard a few years back when I went with one global big FMCG organization. And they said, he said, controls are important, Danny, but there are too many controls in the organization. They're not owned by business. They are not actually operated. There's somebody in the second line actually asking us to do something and we are doing. It's not enhancing business performance. It feels like it's slowing things down, it's giving a false impression, and what it adds up to high cost of control. So, as you think about controls, why controls, and what controls you're going to think about, it is fundamental that you think about some of these issues that you actually need to resolve with the future of controls. And I am sure in a number of you would actually agree with me with this code to say, you know what? I actually don't know what is my cost of controls. I actually don't know why we have too many controls. So this is what that we are trying to resolve. So I will just pause there for a moment. I wanted to see what are your top three priorities for the controls agenda. Can I please ask the tech team to look at the poll question, please? Okay, there are uh, seven ideas I have put in. What are your top three priorities for the controls agenda? Let me try to understand so that it helps me to drive the next few minutes in the conversation as I go into reimagining the controls. I please request you to participate in the poll and give your views. Tech team, please feel free to show the results when people are ready and you can see how many have contributed. And I will take a note of the results so I can talk about it and bring it to life for you. Okay, that's interesting. So I can see 47% of you actually have said that we need to optimize the number of controls and ensure they are truly risk-based. Yeah, I will touch on that particular point. I will show you as we go into reimagining the controls how I will share examples of how global organizations are doing it. 60% of you said increase controls automation and leverage technology. That's a challenge everywhere. Um, improve controls monitoring, 56%. And this is where some of the Gen AI, and I have one demo time permit I will share with you that how Gen AI is actually transforming the whole controls monitoring and assurance landscape. So, and the final point I would make, the 43% of you have put enhanced controls culture across the organization. And from my experience of working with Unilever, Maersk, Pepsi, Philip Morris, Diageo, it is quite fundamental that we need to think about the controls culture also. But I've taken a note about the top ones, which is the optimization, number of controls, um, and the second one about the automation. And let me try to bring them into live on those next slides. Okay, tech team, if you are happy, I will move on. So let me try to reimagine the controls life cycle. Yeah, before I go into the slide, when I say controls life cycle, for all of you to understand, we are talking about the whole life cycle starting from defining the controls. So, how you understand the risk and how you define the controls. Then, once you have defined how you operate the controls, and then how you monitor. And monitor is not assuring controls, how you know that the controls are actually giving you the business results, not how controls are operating effectively or not, how it's giving the business results. So that's monitoring of the controls. And then how you're assuring that the controls are designed and operating effectively. So across the life cycle. So let me go into um, what we are seeing today and how I am seeing the good practices evolving across the global organizations. By the way, not one organization have all these good practices. It's a collection of good practices that we are seeing with global organizations across the world. That doesn't mean everybody is having all. So I will start with define. Yeah. So for a moment, you think about how we are defining the controls today. We go into workshops, we talk about what are the risks we have, and then what compliance we need to get into, and then design some controls. It's quite manual, detective controls. There's a heavy documentation. There are when you actually have the auditor sitting on your head and saying, hey, we need to do this, we need to have this documentation, we need to have everything on, and I need a control for everything. Now, this is where well, I say old world, but it's a current world still. Yeah. And what we see where the global organizations and local organizations in the UK and in Europe, and I have some of the work that I've done with Sage in Africa and Diageo in Africa. The first thing I can see people doing and the business are doing are actually using different risk tools. Yeah. By the way, I'm not going to sell you any particular tool. I may refer to some of the tools, but that doesn't mean there's the answer. That tool is the best tool. Yeah. I have seen the use of GenAI in understanding the business process as well the external environment and combining things to say these are the critical risks. And the focus is clearly shifting to okay, how controls can deliver business objectives. So I was working with Diageo, I can share this, in Ghana and Nigeria. And we were trying to look at with the GM and MD of these two business units in Diageo. Okay, what are your risks and controls? And he said, one of the biggest risks I have, I need to manage this whole marketing function. I would say, okay, what is that we have to manage the risk? And we came to the conclusion that we don't need to talk about risk and control. We want to understand what marketing is trying to achieve. And then if marketing is trying to achieve these set of business objectives, then what sort of controls I need to put in order to enable them to achieve these objectives? Yeah. So we actually saw how the sales team members are actually promoting and spending money on the promotions. And we looked at where are the decision points that are actually derailing the promotions or are not giving the return that we are. And we said, okay, these are your pain points. They're nothing but your risks. And what activities, what actions you want to take that will allow you to actually get the maximum out of those promotions. So, therefore, the culture clearly is shifting to value driven design. And the most important thing which is happening, and I touch on this automation point, I work with SAP quite a lot, but with Oracle and Microsoft also. All the ERP platforms are actually allowing you to maximize the configured controls in the system. When I say configured control, a very simple example is a three-way match or a vendor master data assessment. You can see more and more you are getting into those configured control. You just go with the system. You don't need to have a manual. However, there are what we call, and this management review controls, like financial statements at the end of the month, where you need to look at judgments, you need to look at assumptions, and you need to look at accruals, etc. Now, this is where GenAI is making a huge difference. I have seen one of the global beverage organization and FMCG organization who are actually using GenAI to read the month-end report and allowing the business leaders to really focus on what matters most for them and directing them to think about and challenging them why these numbers, what is that? It's not matching with what you are saying. So it's no more somebody saying, oh, the sales went down because of the heavy rainfall we had. No, there are other reasons, and that's where GenAI is getting. Make it is an integrated approach. It's no more just financial and financial to the operate. Now, for a moment, think about if 60 to 70% of your controls are configured and automated, and then you are using GenAI and other machine learning, just not GenAI, the AI and the machine learning, and even the RPAs, the digital twins, some of them have applied, then what is that you are operating? Because the system is driving. So you are then focusing on how the workflows can be automated, how the evidencing of these controls can be automated, and how you are making life easier for your the users, for your people, for your employees. This is where the whole smart operations are coming into. And the other biggest point I see, we have brilliant controls, we have brilliant frameworks, but they are not embedded into the day to day business. You go to the salesperson or you go to the shop floor manager, he or she will say, I don't understand. What is this control? You have to design controls along with business. You cannot have somebody sitting in the corporate house just saying, these are the risks, therefore these are the controls. You have to get them. And we follow agile methodology. You know, number of you have come across the agile process, right? We run sprints. In that sprint, we actually engage the first line business to think about risk, to prioritize risk. You and I may not be involved in supply chain. So how on earth we are going to prioritize these risks are important for me? You need to get those people who are actually doing it day in, day out, involve them and engage them to really make the ownership. Then we come to monitoring. I see a real-time dashboard more and more coming into play. Yeah, number of you have heard Celonis. Actually, Celonis will look at process, and we are using it, and they will actually tell you where the deviations are, where are the exceptions, and it will allow you to really get into where are the exceptions. And if you look at, and I don't have to share any secretive stories. You look at what Walmart is doing or what Unilever is doing. Some of their inventory, the shop flows are absolutely automated. Yeah, there the decisions are even taken based on this exception, based on a monitoring result. They will say, "Hey, there is an exception," and they are not waiting for a human to do. They are actually getting a machine to read that, understand what is the action, and then bringing in that what we call the agentic AI. Yeah. And these are not anymore some science fiction. These are happening day in, day out. And then the final element is the assurance. Yeah. And this is where, you put it in their automation point. Yeah. How you want to build in automation. If you look at quite a substantial amount of time and effort today are going into managing and doing testing of controls. And if you need to do a proper testing of a control, to test a control, the average time we take is around 8 hours. Yeah, it's almost a day. And we are actually applying GenAI to do the testing. You will not believe this, in 10% of that time. And if I go on that automation discussion, if I look at the whole controls life cycle, if you really think coolly about it, you are actually going to configure controls as part of the ERP and other non-standard technology. You are basically doing 70 to 80% automation. You then operate with smartness, so it's all within the system. What you are going to assure then? you are basically looking at scenarios. You are stress testing them. You are saying, okay, how can we create deviation, disruption in the system? What will happen then? And that's going to be the assurance. It's not going to be a simple testing of control. So you need to think about automation across the life cycle, not just how you absolutely automate the whole assurance cycle. And so when I talk about optimization, when I talk about automation, we need to think about across the life cycle. Yeah, because of time, I just cannot go on and share more examples, but the Ibukun and team would be absolutely happy to engage with you and look at. But I will take 2 minutes to show you a video. I will talk to the video because of the sound. I will just say, now this is using Gen AI in order to test controls. Yeah. And this is on a Gemini platform. And what we are going to do is you will see it's a video I've put in the demo. It's actually a live demo, but put it in a video. So when you get into this controls testing, you know how we test, right? You confirm what is that you are testing, you upload your evidence. We then have the controls tested, results looked at, and the tool we call it Sherlock. Yeah, the name you all are aware of. And what is happening here is this is the platform that you can see. It's actually saying, hey, Chris, what would you like to do today? So now you are trying to get the first step, which is generating the test sheet. So you said, okay, I would like to generate a control test steps based on the control that we have. And this is exactly, it's alive, it's sort of taking the time to go into our database and look at what are the good practices, test steps against this. And within a minute or so, it actually tells you what are the test attributes that you need to look at. Yeah. And then once you have confirmed, now one thing is there, the tool actually it's a human and tool working together. Yeah, just not the tool. So it allows you to make changes. Now, once you have that, this screen, it's asking you to put in the evidence. So you absolutely put in the evidence. So you drop or select a file and you drop or select multiple files. And what this tool is doing, the evidences can be in Excel, the evidences can be in PDF, the evidences can be an email, so that it is multiple. And that is what the best part of AI. So once we put in, we will absolutely put all the data, and it can be, as I said, an image or anything. It will test. And the moment it will test, it will then get into and tell you it's just processing. Here is in detail, it tells you what's the test result, whether it's a fail or a pass. And it will also tell you in detail why it has failed something or why it has passed. So it's just not blindly saying fail or pass with clear example. And it took, instead of 8 hours, it took not even, honestly, half an hour based on the complexity, obviously, and the number of evidences to come up with a pass or fail. And then what the tool does also is, you can interact with the tool. You can say, hey, on the right hand side, you can see the markers there, and it allows you to actually interact with it. And you can say, okay, tell me what I need to do in order to pass this control, or what is that is missing. And it's a sort of interaction, right? And the tool will actually look at the control, look at the evidences, and then it will tell you if you put in this, this, and this. I will show you in a second. It will actually call out, okay, therefore, these are the things you need in order to pass that. Now, as you can see, it will call out, it goes through and call out what is that is required. So then you can resubmit. Now, once you have done all that, somebody has to do the QA because you cannot just trust blindly what the system has done. Here also, another agent can actually look at the quality review. It goes and based on the best practices, it gives us the quality review of the controls that we have tested. And it will highlight where it requires intervention from you to follow up. I will call it out what is that is required and where you need to do. So this is just a simple example of how the Gen AI. Now, before we go into the second opinion poll, as you have seen, you clearly will bring in automation in how you define the controls, you maximize automation through configuration, etc. You operate smartly, you monitor and assure. But in order for all of them to work together, you clearly see we need some loop. And what are these connects the loop is data integration. So it has to flow from the seamless flow across phases, right? Otherwise, you just cannot do that. The second is the feedback loop, because automatically it will tell or send a message that something has gone wrong and you need to react. And then is the dynamic adapter. And if you look at how AI we are using, how machine learning is using, you absolutely can do this in a really smart way. So I know I cannot share every example, etc., but this is how the whole controls is changing. It is absolutely mind blowing in how we are operating today. Now, remember, what is that we are trying to achieve, therefore? We are trying to get an optimized set of controls that are really risk based. We are not going to entertain what is not critical for the organization. We need to think about integrated set of controls, not just financial reporting. We need to think about what is really critical, and therefore you need to think about data. You need to think about using some of the tools to understand where are the deviations, and therefore the risks you can understand, and you're going to make it automated. We talked about it has to be owned and operated first line. It has to be monitored through continuous monitoring. But at the end, yes, we want to have the business resilience, but we also want to, from through controls, have the business performance and strategic objectives achieved. That's the vision. This is where we are going to go. We are not trying to give anybody any false impression of how good, how big, but this is how we really think about it. Okay, now I'll pause and let the second poll to understand where do you see the AI making the biggest impact in your organization, or where do you see across this life cycle where AI can make, yeah, it may not be today, but you, from your perspective, where do you see the biggest value it can bring in? Can I please request as many as you to submit the poll so that we can see where you see the biggest value, and I can share some examples. Controls monitor, absolutely. I 100% agree with you, where we see that how organizations are using AI in monitoring controls. And again, it's just not monitoring how the controls are operating, but how the controls are actually allowing the business to operate and achieve its objective. Give you a very simple example on that. You all know something that across industry sectors are relevant, is relevant, which is the vendor master data. Normally we have a control today which will say, oh, people will, so somebody will review every vendor master data that we create in our system. And quite often I see that's a sort of a preventive before you get into the system, somebody reviewing and saying, oh, this is right or this is wrong. And then there is another manual control at the end to check whether those things are right. And what we see is that today it's absolutely built on technology. What I mean by that, so within whether you are on SAP or Microsoft or Oracle or any other system, there is a configuration which allows you to ensure that the vendor master data is quite complete, accurate. If it is not complete, it will not allow you to submit. There's a validation process, there is a workflow to ensure correct people have looked at it, so it's all automated. However, quite a time we have seen that there are multiple vendor master data creates on the supplier, same vendor, or that vendor is not a right vendor for us because they are not robust enough or resilient enough to serve your organization. So this is where we see that the use of AI in order to look at number of databases to look at whether that's a really a good supplier, they're a robust supplier, and before you can approve, it says, hey, there is a problem with this supplier, or simple things. We have a similar supplier with the similar name. Yes, in the FS sector, I see the use of these sort of tools more, but I can see more and more organizations are using these tools. So that's where I see controls monitoring is really making a big difference. But you are right, controls design, I see a huge use of AI and in making sure that the controls are designed within the system and a part of day to day. Okay, if we come off that results, let me go into the final bit of, you know, I'm not naive that we need money, we need effort to look into in reimagining the whole thing. So, in a practical, pragmatic way, how we go about becoming a control intelligent organization. And when we talk about future of controls, therefore, there are three things you need to really think in a logical way. The first thing is the framework. So, your point, how I optimize the framework, how I make sure they're risk based. The second element is the technology. Absolutely. You need to, it goes hand in hand to think about how I maximize automation. But also, as I said, if you are looking at controls, it's about culture, it's about the operating model, it's about having the shared ambition. So, if I just quickly call out some of the key things you need to consider as you think about your controls framework, look at the data on the process. Don't try to have a source to pay. In one organization I went into, had 60 controls. But why? Why you need 60 controls? Why can't you have 10 controls? Because you can see what the organized from the data of the process flow, that where are the deviation, where are the real risks, and think about it. Integrate the control design. Yeah, think about the value that the control is going to give. Yeah, balance between rules and controls and trust. You don't need to police everything. And hand in hand, you need to think about technology. Without technology, you cannot bring in preventive automated controls, but leverage existing digital assets that you have. Because this is one of the learning I had is absolutely go in and look at what sort of systems you have. And quite often the systems are not maximized in terms of use. Create that ecosystem. Don't try to have one system and do everything. Think about an ecosystem so that you can maximize return and efficiency. And by the way, the fundamental thing is have a shared ambition. Quite often I see internal audit controls are behaving as a police, but that's not objective. Objective of the internal audit, the controls, and everybody is to help business operate safely, securely. They are allowing business to take risk. It's about allowing somebody to take risk. It's not about saying, oh, you cannot do this. Think about Google. What's the fundamental aspect of Google? They don't start with, oh, these are my regulations today, therefore I cannot. The whole mapping of the entire world. Can you imagine how you can do that if you don't have that vision? You will first think about, oh, I have 100 regulations in Nigeria. I cannot just take pictures. But no, I want to have a shared ambition. And then I will help how we manage controls, how we manage to compliance to do it. And then the final point is align capabilities, culture, and incentives. Yes, and when I was working in Africa, by the way, I have absolutely worked hands on in Kumasi, in Ghana, in Lagos. And I actually worked in the field with the salespeople. And I felt like, there is an element of trust, there is an element of culture, and we need to look at it. I know I'm most probably up on time, so I will move quite quickly. So this is about the control intelligent organization, how you operate controls intelligently, how you monitor, and the final thing I will leave you with. Yes, controls is about risk mitigation, definitely, but think about how you are going to reduce the cost of control, how you are going to automate the controls, how you NPS, the net performance score, yeah, net promoter score. How are you going to enhance performance and efficiency and do have a purpose? With that, I'll come off. I can see I'm up on time. So thank you. Happy to take questions, etc. But I hand over to Ozzy.
Okay. Thank you very much, Annie, for the very insightful session that you just provided. And I believe that everyone has something to take home with. So moving on very quickly, we'll move into the panel discussion. And during this session, I guess the objective is to then explore what control transformation really looks like in practice. So to lead the panel session, I will invite Ibukunbi Croft, who will be the moderator for the panel session. And she will be joined by Annie and Sisa as well. So Ibukun, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Shibumi. I know and thanks, Annie, for that insight. I think you set the tone for this Q&A session and also the panel discussion, just to bring more insights into how people can experience or even plan their own future of control. We'll also use the session to answer a few questions that are directed at you, Annie, because we have some questions in the Q&A session. So to start with, I know you've touched on the control loop. You've touched on how one can best optimize control. And I'll start with the first question, which is about what does a future-ready control environment look like? And how does it differ from the control environment many organizations operate today?
Okay. The slide I showed you, what's the vision, right?
Yes.
Optimize. Focus on what matters most. That's number one. Second, the culture. Improve the culture. You cannot get into automation. We need to be practical and pragmatic. We cannot achieve 100% automation immediately. So think about culture. That's the second point. And the third point, you really need to think about how, as leaders, you are going to push that agenda of controls, not policing, but helping business to achieve its objective.
Right. Thank you. And I'll go to Sisa now. I know, Sisa, you've been involved in a lot of control transformation across Africa now, and we'd like you to answer this question. So to say, when organizations, one of the things that came out of the poll is that people want to optimize control, and it would be good to know how this is handled, especially when organizations face 100 of controls across multiple processes. What criteria should determine where to begin, where to deliver, and the greatest value early in the transformation project? You want to share?
Greetings to everyone. Grateful to be here. So I think this is a very interesting question, Bukun, because I think where traditionally we are coming from with the controls agenda is that checklist approach, understanding what are the processes, what are the process risks, and that on its own effectively starts you at a base where the number of controls you are looking at is enormous. And what we've observed now, I think I know I was speaking about configured controls. So there is quite a lot of automation that has already taken place already, and some of the controls being configured within the systems. And that requires us to then challenge the long list approach that we traditionally would have grown up with, to then say, when we want to see real transformation, the key elements I know are speaking to around what is business really trying to achieve, and is my long list of controls not actually duplicating what's already configured in the system already. And it's also understanding where am I exposed most to risk. And I think those are the areas one would want to first prioritize on. With that said, there are certain processes, though, which are mostly repetitive processes, which are essential for financial reporting, essential for other reporting that organizations do. And it's important that data that is processed through those systems or the transactions within that still remain valid, accurate, and complete, because that's the basis. But it's to challenge ourselves to say, when we're looking at those types of controls, what is the approach that we take in terms of transforming that? Because it then helps, using Gen AI as one example and other mechanisms, to have automated capability to actually monitor those, because they are standard processes within the business. But as control leaders, really the focus is around understanding the strategy of the business and how, through controls approach, we enable business to manage and monitor their risks.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Cesar. I'll go back to you, Annie. And I know you've shared a lot of practical example about control transformation, about how organizations have transformed their controls. It would be good to understand how this organization have moved from assessment finding to a structured transformation roadmap. Yeah. What are those factors that has influenced this organization in prioritizing and also sequencing the journey? We've talked about the control intelligence loop. Our audience would like to understand how this can be done. What are you going to prioritize in this transformation journey? And also, how I would like you to share more light on that.
That's a very good question. So, from my practical experience of working with organizations, the first thing we start with, as you said, with assessment, but we set up what we call the design principles, right? What is that and that we want to achieve? And we set the North Stars very clearly that, we don't have automation. So there is no point thinking about, I'm going to achieve 80% automation. That's not going to happen. So if I have limited resources and effort, then where I am going to have the North Star for automation versus North Star for other detective controls, etc. So once you have set the design principles, etc., you then look at, and this is your question about how we prioritize.
Yeah.
We then look at what change we are looking for, how much is the effort of the change, and where it's going to give the maximum benefit out of those elements of the controls life cycle. Quite often we come with that, you know, we have too many controls. The polling numbers also showed, you remember, 67% they wanted to look at. And so quite often I see organizations starting with setting up the good control framework. Yeah. And again, engaging business, not on its own. And and then they go into, okay, as we go into if there's an ERP implementation going on or a new technology, how we controls can be part of that transformation process so that we put the system in design. That's a second. And then or in parallel, we look at, you know, how we change the culture. The change management, the culture is super fundamental in order to achieve how we win the hearts and minds of our people. You cannot go to HR or marketing and then they will say, you know what, I am going to have new risk and control. They don't understand. We finance people, we risk people, we understand. But we need to talk about the language about the change. So this is how we go step by step, design principles, prioritize a framework, get a good framework, optimize the numbers of controls, automate, and create the culture.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much for that feedback. It's very clear. You need to know what your North Stars are, what you want to achieve, what changes are you looking to change, set a good control framework, engage the business. You can't do this alone. And it's also important that you have a parallel run in terms of changing the culture, having the right people to embrace this new control environment that you're pushing. Thank you for that. So I move to CISA. And my question to you, CISA, is how can organizations ensure that control transformation becomes embedded into their business operating model rather than being viewed as a one-time compliance project? We see that a lot around in our markets.
Thanks, Ibukun. I think the response to that really will be expanding on what Anit just shared. And I think based on practical experience working with organizations, we can be talking about the technicality of the control. But what remains very important is to understand that it's people who implement these controls, it's people who manage these controls. And I think in our framework, from a Deloitte point of view, we talk of a people-led, data-driven, technology-enabled framework. People play a very critical role in the success or failure of any controls program. And what we also see is the fact that because some of these initiatives are initiated either from a third or second line perspective within the organizations, not enough effort is put in ensuring that that ownership of the control actually transfers to the first line of defense. Because for us to be able to embed the controls and the controls become part of the day-to-day operations, first line management need to be fully owning and understanding why they have to implement certain controls. So I think coupled with the change management, focusing on people, ownership of the controls in the first line, those are absolutely critical.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that's building on what Annie said, and it puts a clearer view in terms of how do you achieve this. It's about the people. You need people to drive it while you also use data. So it is data-driven, people-led. Also, you also want to know that, yes, there is that need for ownership, and that's where the part of the culture comes to play, where the first line owns the control, takes ownership of the control, and ensure that this becomes a daily routine, a daily part of their day-to-day work. As they're performing their activity, those controls are embedded, and that's how you achieve the control transformation that you're looking for within the organization. So I come back to you, Annie, and my question is, we've talked about a lot of tools, we talk about technologies. It would be good to also understand um, what type of capabilities or skill sets will control teams need over the next 3 years, over the next 3 to 5 years, and where are the biggest gap today? We've spoken about a lot. I know we have a number of people who are control practitioners in this room, who are internal audit practitioners, who are finance people. They want to understand what capabilities and skill set do they need in the next 3 to 5 years, considering all of this emerging tools, technology that we're seeing within the control space?
It's a very good question. And, you know, you would expect me to jump and say, you need tech people. No. So when I look at GRC people or the controls people, the first thing we need is the strategic mindset to understand what's the problem, what's the risk, what is that we are trying to solve, and how we can help organizations to do that. That innovative mindset, that strategic mindset, that consultative mindset. That's number one. The second thing we need is tech savvy. We don't need data scientists all in all, but we need people who have a knack for using technology because more and more we see the technology can actually do things, right? So today, you don't may not need to know the coding by heart. You actually can use AI in order to code for you. But what you need is that savviness in how you are using. And the third element is your ability to or your aspiration to learn on a continuous basis and so that you the world is changing super fast. I even if I work with number of organizations, I don't know number of things. There are others who are doing. So how you learn, how your training and the capabilities that you have, the skills you can learn. So those are the three critical things in my mind that would a controls person would require. And I see the biggest gaps in those ones actually.
Right, thank you. Yeah, so I come back to you, Sisa, and I know the question that comes to everyone's mind is to say, considering what we've heard today, and we want to embark on a future of control transformation for the organization, what is the realistic timeline for a typical current state assessment to a functioning target control environment, and what kind of milestones do they need to track?
So I think if we're going to answer that, there's an important element around the strategic alignment within the organization first. To say if the organization wants to achieve this transformation, what is the driving force behind it? I know some organizations, and also depends on the maturity of the organization. An organization that has been implementing the likes of SOX for a number of years, its level of maturity versus an organization that has not been regulated in terms of the controls and reporting on controls. Those organizations would be on two different levels of maturity. Defining the transformation journey, it's important to understand what does the organization want to achieve. Is it a response to a regulation, which will have a set timeline, by the way, from a regulation point of view? Is it means to improve own internal efficiency and get a better handle of the controls? I think those impact in terms of what you then look at as a timeline. But typically, what we've looked at, and the organizations we've worked more with like a 3 to 5 year timeline. I would say an organization that was, if on a scale of 1 to 5, I would say at that level 2 level of maturity, with the intent of improving that level of maturity. The first part effectively took us setting the foundation, understanding what we want to measure from a controls point of view, which areas present key controls, and how do we define what a key control is from that perspective, to setting up a framework, and then from there defining what will be the gradual improvements that we want to see. As a start, that's getting the current state of where we are from a maturity point of view. And if we want to progress from this level to a level 4 or a level 5, what are the required steps to be taken, and what's our appetite from a time frame perspective? But I would like to say, Ibukun, it's not a 1 month or 2 month journey. Organizations need to be strategic and be prepared to spend the time to gradually improve. Because I think that where the timeline also becomes more important is that from a change management perspective and embedding what you want as your future state of control, we must not underestimate the amount of engagement at business level, different business units that need to take place for the program to be successful.
Right. So what I hear you say, sister, is that in terms of the timeline and how realistic it is a function of first of all, strategic alignment with the business, and also what your future state control you want it to look like. And then you will move at a gradual pace in terms of where you want to go to. It's not studied, it's not sudden, and that's why you should have a change management that helps you to monitor and track your progress. And that takes us back to the control loop where that Annie spoke to. So I'll come back to Annie. I know there are questions that people have posted, and I wouldn't like a situation whereby we will leave this webinar without touching to some of this question. And the first question is from Ekpeyon, and he asked, he said, could excessive controls themselves become a risk? For example, slowing down innovation, creating workarounds, or encouraging employees to bypass controls. How should organizations find the right balance?
That's a very good question. And we talked about this, right? Absolutely, too many controls will slow down. It will add cost. It will not achieve the objectives you want to achieve. So your point is how organizations should go about it. Yeah, I think in a simple way, if you think about three things. One, how we can win the hearts and minds of people. That's the first thing in my mind. Yeah. The business, they need to get engaged, involved to understand that what the risk they are trying to manage. Yeah. What controls they need to put in. We know what is risk, the word or phrase risk and controls. Others may not know the phrase even. So you need to guide them, you need to help them. And as you do that, they actually know what are the risks better than you as a controls leader. So therefore, that's the first, winning hearts and minds, engaging them. Second, help create a platform to succeed. So as you define your controls, ask them what matters most to them. Simple things like what and how you can simplify the control description so that it is clear. You don't have to write all technical jargons. What is that your people can actually give them guidance, give them templates, because your success is when they operate the controls successfully. That's your success, not finding a fault. And third, think about a sustainable way of keeping it. Because if you are not giving the platform or create that sustainable way, it will fizzle out. So when I give one simple example, use simple things like chatbot, right? You can actually go and put in a number of controls, data and information. So I can actually go and I have this problem or confusion. I can actually chat and ask, hey, I'm going through this situation. What is that? It will give you a guidance that may not be 100%, but it will give you the guidance to think. That's a sustainable way of thinking. I think those are practical, pragmatic ways of actually helping. Obviously, we talked about automation. We talked about making it risk-based. Those will absolutely are the fundamentals to make it. But these are the practical steps to get it uh, in a practical number of controls to manage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. I like the fact that you did mention the chatbot to help with providing guidance to people. So I'll come to you, Sisa, and the question that I want you to answer is this question. It says, from a combined assurance perspective, how do we ensure that internal control, as a second line, does not duplicate the action of internal audits when it comes to control testing? I'm asking you this question because I know you're doing a major control transformation project, and how you've been able to move between all of this three lines and ensure that there are no duplications in the testing of those controls.
Thanks, Ibukun. This remains one of the most interesting areas for me going forward, because with the use of AI and automation controls management, what I'm seeing is that it's actually blurring the lines of defense. If you've put a monitoring mechanism in place, sourcing information from the same ERP systems, that outcome, whether you're looking at it from a first line, second line, or third line of defense, is what it is, because it's coming from the same database effectively. And ensuring that there is no duplication of effort requires that there must be a strategic alignment between third line, internal audit, second line, and first line. What we have seen is that a lot of these processes, the initiation of, or the ideas behind driving a transformation program may start in the third line or may start in the second line. But what is important is that it must find its home and resonate within the first line. When that happens, that enables the second line to be able to focus on the areas from a monitoring point of view that second line should be focusing on. And the alignment in the understanding of risk between second line and third line also becomes critical. And the definition of some of the terms, when you say something is a high risk, medium risk, low risk, what we've seen is that tends to cause quite a conflict between the lines of defense, the interpretation or quantification of what is a risk. And for a functioning combined assurance approach, I don't see it happening without that strategic alignment between those lines of defense.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's why there is a lot of emphasis around combined assurance, where all the three lines of defense are working together, and also seeing the third line, especially the internal audit, helping to coordinate and organize how the first line and the second line do organize to ensure that the risk within the organization are managed appropriately. So I come back to Annie, and the question is, how can a business reduce the cost of control while simultaneously strengthening the overall control system without compromising risk management, compliance, efficiency, and any critical aspect of the control environment?
That's a good question. I think the first and foremost, we need to understand what is the cost of control. There is no scientific approach to calculate the cost of control. Yeah, there are different ways to. But you need to think about what is the cost of controls across the three lines, and basically, what's the cost to operate the control, what is the cost to monitor, and what is the cost to assure. So that once you know, then you can target where you want to go and you drive the cost reduction. The second point is then in your controls, if I just go on controls assurance, right, the controls monitoring, where people have put in quite a lot of percentage in the response, use technology to reduce the manual intervention or time spent in order to absolutely test those controls. That's a huge cost to the organization. And when I look at operate controls without changing the control, let's say we're not reducing the number, we just have the same number of controls. Target the detective monitoring controls. Why? First, there are two reasons for that. One, you can actually move them to monitoring rather than operating them as a control. Second, even if you're operating as a control, if you break at a very high level any of these controls, there are three elements to it. One is there is a report element, so generation of report or accumulation of data. The second element is reviewing this data, and the third element is reporting on this data. That's the three things in our detective control. And if you look at the majority of the effort, you will be surprised. We analyzed, and for a global organization, the huge amount of time and effort was going into generating the information, whereas the time and effort should go into reviewing the information. So your generation and the report, the data, you can easily automate it. And when I say easily, use the existing systems and tools that you have in organization. And then get into that, okay, I have those controls, how I operate. Now, you may not be automating it completely, but where are the biggest manual effort? Reduce that, those target those manual effort to reduce. And then we talked about the reporting. Make it smart. Make it, don't ask people to generate manual evidences, sign something. Think about, you have the power of youth. I'll go back to the first point. OECD says across Africa, there's a youth a savviness about the adoption and use of the youth under 35 is immense. Use that power. Obviously, you need to put the right guardrails and how you are adopting and how you are using tech.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So I go to Cesar. And Cesar, this question is around still on different transformation projects where there are initiatives, changing priorities, the speed of change, geopolitical environment, a number of micro challenges. How do you keep the momentum of a control transformation program until you achieve the maturity control culture? So it's just talking about you have a control transformation project ongoing and they're changing priorities. How do you keep that momentum and you still achieve a mature control culture or control environment? I think that's what the person will wanted to write. Yeah.
I'll appreciate Anna's input there, but my view, Ibukun, is change will happen. Change is the only thing that will be constant going
Yes.
forward. And there will always be change in priorities within the different organizations. The important part for me is that strategic alignment, strategic intent to say this is where we want to go with our controls journey. A lot will change along the way, but if the organization is aligned around that vision to be achieved, it's a better method to sort of sustain the momentum and keep going with the transformation until it achieves the intended objective. Change we
Right.
can't prevent, it will happen.
Can I
True.
just,
Yeah,
I
please
would
go
just like
ahead.
to add, Ibukun and Caesar, absolutely what you said. And you know the point about in a sea of many transformation projects, you look at any organization, local, global, the number of projects, different projects going through is immense. And where is the time to every month produce your financial report, operate the controls, and then think about all this transformation? So, three things. What I have seen practically and pragmatically organizations are using it. Number one is don't try to have your controls transformation as far as possible as another separate project. Look at what initiatives or transformations already going in and make sure control is part of it. If you are having a ERP implementation, if you're having a HR system implementation, you should have the infrastructure within an organization where in the design team, controls is part of the design team. You have to spend 2 hours per week to sit in their workshop. Sit in their workshop. Don't try to do on your own. So that's part of it. That's number one. Second, your how you keep the momentum. And whether we like it or not, you need to have the buy-in of the senior leadership. And when I say buy-in, it needs to be seen. If the CEO, CFO, or the CEO, CFO minus one are absolutely pushing the agenda, people will listen. And third, I go back to my the phrase I use almost every time. win the hearts and minds of people, show them the value that you have. Otherwise, nobody is going to really, they will do it because it's coming top down, they have to do, but they will accept it and do it in a sustainable way if you are actually winning their hearts and minds.
Yeah. Thank you. I know that if we continue, we're not going to stop the session. So I'd like to get the closing thought from you, Annie, and also Sisa, on all that we've discussed today before I yield the floor back to Shubhami.
Caesar, you want to go? I have spoken enough, most probably, but I will do. But Caesar, you go ahead first.
No, thanks, Ibukun. I think from my perspective, there's few points that Annie has shared already, but I think remains very relevant on this journey. One was around the capabilities required for the future, being tech savvy and not being afraid of the technology. I think that's a reality we have to face. Some of us who come from a call it accounting or traditional audit background, it's something that may not be natural just yet, but it's something we definitely have to challenge ourselves towards because that's how our work is changing going into the future. And I think the aspects around understanding that whilst the program may be focusing on controls, it is really about people, and we need to keep that in mind as professionals in this space. Thanks, Ibukun.
Yeah, thank you. Annie?
You know what? When I worked with Diageo and others across West Africa, I loved whole area. I thought we need to work on our strength in Africa. Where is the strength? The strength is one, the youth. I know I made this point a few times. The nature, the adaptation, the chance of taking risk and all that is an absolute strength. Use that. Yeah. Now the organizations have to create the infrastructure to use that power in order to, but the once they do that, they will understand how we are going to manage the risk. Put guardrails. That's number one. Second is if you look at African business, we have the conglomerates, the big ones, and the big global ones, and so on, are really powerful. I think they need to lead and this is a role of us, I think, the accounting firms and others, that we need to engage with this big global house to set the standards. I personally feel Africa can actually show some of the world that innovation, the way you use the mobile finance, etc., is absolutely mind blowing. So, why we cannot innovate with this global organization in a strategic way, which are African based, to show and make people believe in it? And the third thing is, I think there is an element of all of us working together to build capability. It will not happen in one day. It has to give, and everybody should play a part in it. But those are the strengths that we need to work on if you want to make a change in the controls and the risk and others.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Sisa. Thank you, Annie. It's been a pleasure discussing this topic today. And I know that there are a number of takeaways for everyone in the room. One is key is strategic alignment. You need to get the leadership involved. Two, you need to engage with the people. You need to win them because when you win them, you are able to get the desired result in terms of what you want to achieve in terms of future of control. You need to also challenge yourself as an individual to embrace technology, embrace the evolving world that we're in today, and also continue on that change process in terms of evaluating, reviewing, and be sure that, yes, what am I solving for as an organization? What risk do I want to optimize? What risks do I want to address? What is the most important to me? And then you can then define those KPIs and design your program, Remember, you need to get your control framework right and also balance between the technology you're using and also the tools. That will be the end of this panel. I will yield the floor to our moderator. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you very much Thank you very much, Ibukun, and to all the panelists that joined in sharing their perspective on how organizations can reimagine their controls in our fast-paced, changing business environment. I believe that the discussions have further reinforced that future of controls is not only about adopting technology, but also about strengthening your governance, embedding the right culture, and also designing controls that would support better decision making in your organization. So I believe to finalize or to close out in today's session, we've come towards the end of the session. Three key reflections that we would want you all to take home as leaders that is currently trying to drive future of controls transformation within your organization is that one, controls transformation is not a project, it's a permanent shift into where your organization sees itself, and it would help in managing and reassuring that you have the right skill sets or capabilities to drive that innovation or transformation in your organization. And the question is not whether controls will be tested. The question to us as leaders is that the question is whether they would then hold. So you need to build for test what you have seen, and this would help you in that transformation journey. So I'd like to thank everyone that has joined us today and has also participated in the conversations and discussions around future of controls. We hope that the insights shared will support your organization's journey towards being more resilient, embracing technology, and also driving, value-driven insights around your controls environment. Thank you once again. Up the screen, we have our survey questions in terms of your feedback. We hope to get your feedback. Please use your phones to use the scan codes. We would also be dropping a link in the chat button to help you with the evaluation of this particular session. In addition to that, we do note that there are some questions. Not all questions in the chat buttons were taken. One thing we want to assure you of is that we would provide responses to this, and we will share with everyone that has registered, including the slides, because I've seen comments from participants as to if the slides will be shared. So we would collate all of that, and we would include it in the slides that we would share to all registered participants. So thank you once again. Do enjoy the rest of your day, and it's a pleasure having you on our session. Thank you.